Oh yeah, had to get dressed up for this news. Hey, what's up, you guys? It's me, Ghostface, back at it again, and I gotta take this mask off. Whew. I don't even know if I can actually do this for the whole video, to be honest with you. Hey, what's up, you guys? It's me, Dear Kid Review, back again with another video, and we finally got the announcement of Scream 7 finally in the works, with Neve Campbell posting on her Instagram that she's back, and also the fact that it's actually called Scream 7 this time, but we're gonna get into a lot of details with that later on in this video. What are my thoughts about this? It's cool, essentially, that we're getting another Scream movie. I like the Scream franchise, and it is kind of like my top two, to be honest, between Scream and Chucky, competing side by side for who's getting the most views nowadays. But if I'm going to be honest with you, Scream was one of my most favorites and also what introduced me to the horror genre. But the way everything's been going on with Scream 5, 6, hopefully what was originally going to be 7, but yeah, there's a lot I have to discuss here about this. The big news I know is Neve Campbell coming back as Sidney, because we already know from all the controversies and stuff in the last time, where in Scream 6 she was scheduled to come back, but she couldn't come back because Spyglass Studios didn't know a way to negotiate her payment over her dedication to the franchise, which is kind of weird because she's a main staple of what made Scream Scream, and I don't understand why they went through that whole thing of kicking her out of Scream 6. But the way it turned out, if the movie itself didn't even need Sydney, and at least made the newer cast more essential to the plot. Another fact about this is the return of Kevin Williamson back to the Scream franchise again. After writing Scream 1, 2, and 4, he didn't return for 5. He was there more as like a producer credit onto the movies, but it's kind of good to see him actually directing a Scream movie this time, because he's done a lot. Like, he wrote Scream, he planned out the outline for Scream. Most people know that Wes Craven directed Scream, but it was mainly Kevin Williamson's influence that actually made him inspire what Scream is today. And yes, it's been noted that Scream 3, which is my least favorite out of all the Scream movies, wasn't written by him, but then he came back for 4, and 4 feels more in line with the original movies, even though it was essentially a sequel planning out to be a remake of the series. Him directing is interesting, but he's not writing it, since the original writers from Scream 5 and 6 are returning for this one. But here's my little thoughts about the whole thing, about this whole announcement coming up right now. The main thing about this announcement is it feels like Spyglass just announced it just to announce it, because we already know that it's been a year of controversy with Scream 7, where they fired Melissa Barrera. The director had to step down. Jenna Ortega is not even coming back, and who knows if any other returning cast member for the original series is coming back. We haven't heard anything about the twins. We haven't heard anything about Gale, not even Kirby returning. And all in itself, I feel like if there was a way to go back before this whole Scream situation was going on, let's go back to where Scream 6 ended, because that's where I feel like the real thing starts. The movie ended itself with Sam and Tara actually going out in the limelight, since they didn't have to deal with another ghost face that defeated the Richie's family. And I feel like that right there, the story ends there, but there were still unanswered questions in between movies, because there's a lot I have to decipher between 5, 6, and why a 7, with the way they're trying to do it right now, feels more rushed. But here are my thoughts about the whole situation. A pro I can mention right now is Sydney returning, because yes, she was absent in the last movie, and her presence wasn't felt to a point where we had Gale, but then the next continuing characters, Sam, Tara, they did their own thing and actually made the story about them, since Sydney wasn't the main focus anymore. She was more sidelined in Scream 5. But I feel like in this case, Scream 6 made it so it would be the Carpenter's sister story, rather than continue on in Sydney and let her have her happy ending. The con about that is that now that everything is set in stone and we don't have the Carpenter sisters anymore, I feel like this is going to be a new Scream story per se, because it's not going to continue off with the last two movies per se, where Scream 5, you can say Sydney was in it, but she wasn't the main character, but it's still going to continue her storyline onto 7. But I feel like there's no way to disconnect a story if you already established your group of characters and how each of them factor into the movie. Without Sam with the family heritage, with Billy, I feel like there was nothing there to continue off of, because we don't even know what the relationship was with Sydney and their parents, because that's another thing in itself. We haven't seen Sam's mom, which, if you remember in Scream 5, she was infatuated with Billy Loomis, and it was the main factor into why she had this whole secret pregnancy with Billy, even though it was retconned later on in the movies, where it didn't make sense for Scream 1, but in this story it makes kind of sense. It's going the reboot angle, and I feel like a way to continue on the legacy with the original killers is interesting, but we haven't seen her parents, not even Tara's dad, because you got to remember that Sam is technically Billy Loomis's daughter, and Tara was another daughter from a separate marriage, and we haven't even seen her dad yet. Another thing about this entirely is the main thing I'm seeing with this whole Scream franchise is that it's more of a story structure idea where each sequel had a riff on movies. And in the last one, I actually thought, and it was kind of smart for the movie to play it out this way because I didn't even notice it until a couple watches right after, where 5 was essentially the reboot, the thing that actually continued off in the franchise because the first original 3, each of them had a separate thing: horror movie, sequel, trilogy. Scream 4 did its own thing with a remake, posing it as copying the original Scream, but also influenced it away for today because they had landlines. Now we had smartphones. And in Scream 5, which is technically a sequel, but is also treated like a reboot, like a reintroduction to the series, it dropped the 5 and actually used Scream as the main name. Even they even mentioned how, oh, the last Woodsboro event had happened 11 years ago. So, like that, it means, okay, so the sequels happened, but everything's been under wraps. Nobody knows what's been going on with Woodsboro, and at least made it on its own and separate from the universe it was originally in. Scream 6 continued the angle with a reboot sequel, or a requel, perhaps, if the way they mentioned in the movie. But the way I saw it is that I thought they were going to do like a sequel, like an actual sequel, like it's not going to depart from movies. But it's funny because when Mindy explained the whole thing, it kind of did make sense for the reboot trilogy where it was a thing that Scream 1 or Scream would be the reboot sequel. Scream 6 is the requel, so they would technically be in a college just like a Scream 2. And now that we're going into 7, which is another thing I'm wondering if I know they're trying to do the reboot sequel angle, but if you're gonna copy of a franchise from another franchise, let's a la Star Wars on this one. Each of them, the sequel trilogy had its own way of copying each of the 4 movies, like A New Hope, Empire, and Jedi. But the way I'm seeing it with 7 is, are they gonna do Scream 7 like what they did with Scream 3, where they make it meta? Because previously in the Scream 6, Gail mentioned that she wanted to get the book rights to the Woodsboro murders that happened in Scream 5, but also she couldn't get everything because everything was all murder documentaries and she didn't get access to the movie rights. I don't even know if they're going to try to do that type of angle now that we have all the survivors or all the surviving characters of Scream 6, because all of them are still alive, including Kirby. And if they're going to do a way to have them actually go to Hollywood or do a meta commentary thing on Scream 7 and Scream 3, that would be interesting, but also a way that you can't do the same thing 3 times in a row. Scream 5 made its own thing copying Scream. Scream 6 copied Scream 2, but with a few technicalities because the killers were relations to the original killer in Scream 5, Richie. But the thing is that you need actual stakes with this one because in Scream 6, as a good of a movie as it was, you gotta admit you cannot get stabbed like 30 something times and still walk from it, because it's crazy how in Scream 5 you acknowledge that Dewey died from a stabbed, both slid up and down, but Chad getting stabbed like 30 something times in Scream 6 and you're telling him he made it out alive? There's no way you got to do the same thing 3 times in a row. And also, if you're going to do that, actually have higher stakes in this one, because I don't even know if this is essentially the final chapter. It is of this trilogy, but I don't know if it's going to be like the last Scream movie they're going to do, or unless they're going to take time off this, keep it a few year break, then come back with another sequel. Because the whole thing depends on Spyglass and the way they want to factor things out. Because if I'm going to be honest with you, there are 2 sides of fans I see on this one. One side is the OG Scream fans that are like, oh, I'm happy that Sydney is back because she started the whole franchise. And two, the modern day fans where they're seeing that Melissa Barrera did her thing, reintroducing the movies to a new audience. And I'm going to say it like this: I wasn't a fan of her in Scream 5 because I'm like, okay, this is some new things you're adding onto the Scream lore. But it would have been more interesting to see Jenna as the main character in 5. But then in 6, she convinced me and made herself her own character rather than just, oh, I'm the new lead. And I actually was influenced to like, okay, so we can do a lot more with this character. And I wanted to see how that would have gone in Scream 7. But Spyglass did his thing, firing her in the first place for speaking her mind, even though it wasn't wrong, unlike certain studios who would actually keep actors, Warner Brothers. But this whole thing with Spyglass is the one thing I feel like is going to be the main problem with Scream 7. Everybody knows what they did. And it's not like people are dumb enough not to know the internet. Everybody knows movie news and everything is spread out everywhere at once, like Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram. I get my stuff about movie news, and everybody knows what's going on in the movie space. And the main factor of how this influences the box office of this is interesting because I remember when around Thanksgiving came out, the Thanksgiving movie that came out, um, Spyglass released it. and a week after the movie released is when they fired Melissa Barrera, and that actually affected the box office of Thanksgiving, and it made it drop a whole majority the second week. But it's still getting a sequel because success the first week, and I can just say I actually liked it, and I'm kind of thankful that they did kind of make a sequel to this. The main thing is Spyglass. It's the Scream name has been tainted already, and who knows if they're going to come back for this. I might do another video explaining what they can try and do in a sequel for Scream 7, because this is just me reporting the news, and I just want to say, if they're going to do this right, bring them back. Give them time. We already got a script for it already, but give it time to actually bring Melissa Barrera, Jenna Ortega, even the twins, if you want to be honest with you, because all of them made this trilogy. They're the main focus of this trilogy, and I feel like it's a disservice if they don't bring them back for the final chapter of the supposed franchise. Hopefully, they could try to do right by Spyglass. Spyglass, do better. Pay your actors. We already went through a strike because of that. And respect your horror legends because they're really worth more than you actually bargained for. Alright, you guys, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. All my social media is down in the description below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.